All right. Hey there. I just pulled up Marilyn Monroe's chart and I'm looking at it for the first time. And so I'm going to verbally talk about what I'm looking at. And of course, I want to see if it's a day chart or a night chart. And I can see the sun in the 10th house in the sign of Taurus. This is a day chart. Right away, I know that Jupiter is her most benefic planet and her most malefic is Mars, and it's over there in the 8th house. Ugh, again, over there in the 8th house of death. All right, now I'm looking further. I see her ascendant, which is her body, her personality. It's Marilyn herself, is ruled by Leo. And so I need to find out where the ruler of Leo is because that's going to tell me where her life direction was, where the journey of her life was always heading towards, and that is the 10th house of her outer image. And indeed, that was her focus in life, was her outer image. We have the sun over there in the 10th house, and it's in the sign of Taurus. It's not in exaltation or its domicile, fall, or detriment, so it's just really unaffected in that regard. It's doing okay just being in the sign of Taurus. If I look to the right and I go over 2 houses or 60 degrees, she's got a sextile from the planets in the 8th house. We'll really just focus on Mars. Well, Mars, which is her malefic out of sect, Mars can indicate your sex drive, and if it's a malefic out of sect, it could be a sex drive that's a little off, a little too much, a little aggressive, and it's affecting her 10th house, which is her outer image tied into her physical body. So there's some issues there you could see. And then you've got that 10th house sun squaring the 7th house, which is Aquarius, because that's 90 degrees away. And 90 degrees away from a house on either side is a square. A square is a very difficult angle. Why is it difficult? Well, let's look at it. We've got Taurus is squared to Aquarius. Taurus is an inward focused earth sign, and Aquarius is an outward focused air sign. It means that these two zodiac signs and houses or planets in these houses have to combine and come up with some sort of result. And so that's where the difficulty is. One wants to communicate in an outward direction, which is the 7th house, and one wants to keep things more private and very down to earth. That would be her 10th house. That's where the conflict, that's where the square comes in. You have her moon over there in the 7th house, which is her emotional makeup and her physical health, and it's squaring her sun, which is her vitality, her spiritual part. It's just they're in conflict with each other, and that affects her health. It affects her image when you are in conflict with two internal parts of your being, and she had that. She's also got Mercury right up there, 4 degrees away from the sun, so her thinking was very tied into her image, and her thinking affected her outer image. What she chose to do, she thought about how to be who she was to the public, and she really definitely did. How we have Jupiter also next to the sun over there in the 7th house, and Jupiter is her benefic of sect, so that really kept her, even though she was in conflict, she had that Jupiter pumping energy into that moon of upbeatness and positiveness. And I believe that she did have that part of her personality, but it also, that Jupiter was able to show you what type of person she was in a relationship, and the fact that she had the ability to bring and expand an abundance of whatever the topic is where Jupiter's placed. In this case, it's the 7th house of relationships. She absolutely had no problem with relationships. The fact that her moon is in that 7th house means that that's where she felt emotionally comfortable, is when she was paired up with somebody, and that was truly indeed part of her personality. If we stick to that 7th house, if you want to know what the outcome of her relationships would be, we have to look to Aquarius, which rules that house, and the status of Saturn, because Saturn rules Aquarius. Let's find Saturn. Saturn is over there in the 4th house, and Saturn is in Scorpio. And Scorpio, it's in the 4th house. It's in an angle house. An angle house is a very powerful house, meaning the outcome of her relationships were seen and felt very powerfully by her and very internally, because the 4th house is your home and your private life. And because it's Saturn in Scorpio, and Saturn is just, it's really stops warm and fuzzy feelings. Saturn denies things. Saturn delays things. The end result for Marilyn, unfortunately, would always be kind of a hard stop, a coldness. Just it's not really a good planet unless it's being in its domicile, or, it's an indication that there is going to be difficulties always resulting in her relationships. And in addition, look at it, Saturn is squaring the 7th house, meaning Saturn is a water sign internally. It's in a water sign, Scorpio, internally, and it's squaring that Aquarius, which is air and outward. So you have a conflict. They can't agree. One wants to say private emotionally, inward, and then the other house wants to communicate outwardly. And that's where the conflict was. Privacy, but outward image. Privacy, but outward directed. That's where the conflict was in some capacity. We have Uranus right there close to Mars. Uranus is sudden and abrupt in the house of death. Mars is in the house of death. It's a malefic out of sect. It's a difficult Mars, meaning something difficult is going to be tied into open enemies, other people's money, her own inheritance, or death. I believe in this case it is showing us something about the fact of how she would die, which is violently, abruptly, which really is a drug overdose. Let's find out where the 2 zodiac signs are that Mars rules. Somehow we have to combine them, or one of them, into Mars. And so we know that Mars rules Scorpio, which is the 4th house. And we know that Mars rules Aries, which is in the 9th house. Interesting. We've got, I think it's that 4th house that ties into Scorpio, into Mars. 4th house is her home. And did you know that 4th house, ancient astrologers believed, it's the end of life? So that to me is telling us, and you got the 2 malefics, you got Mars in the 8th and Saturn in the 4th. It's telling us that she will die in her home. And she did. She died in her home. Let's see, what else would I see in this chart? Well, her midheaven was in the 9th house. So even though the sun was in the 10th, her life focus was, or of her focus, strong focus, was her outer image. What she really enjoyed was just learning, traveling, expanding herself, new adventures. And it's right there close to Venus. But Venus in Aries is in detriment, meaning that she wasn't very successful, probably at accomplishing a lot of that. Also, that back to the 4th house, that Saturn in the fourth house tells you that she may have had problems of some source with her father, because the fourth house can represent the father, as well as Saturn being just a malefic planet. Even though it's the malefic of the sect, it's still just sadness and difficulties in her childhood, which she did have. Funny that she's got Neptune in the first house, which Neptune really has no boundaries, just expands all over forever. Kind of a spaced out type planet. It's a secondary ruler of Pisces. And that was part of her personality. Any outer planet, which is Pluto, Uranus, or Neptune, if it's in the first house, you have to pay very close attention to it. It comes into play because it's part of her personality. And she was very woo-woo, kind of came across as out there. So that's interesting. What about Pluto over there in the 12th house? Even though Pluto's an outer planet and a generational planet, it's still in that house of death. Excuse me, the difficult house, the 12th house, which could be the house of your own undoing. And because the planet Pluto rules death, things that she did really caused her demise. You got Cancer ruling the 12th house. Where's the ruler of Cancer? It's the moon over there in the 7th. That means she's going to the 7th house of partnerships and open enemies. It means that there's going to be secrets, that secretive house of your own undoing. 12th house's ruler is acting out over there in the house of relationships. So she will have secret liaisons, which she did, and her decisions could really be her own undoing, which it was. Anyway, that's a little bit about Marilyn. I wonder, what do you see in this chart that you'd like to share?